Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this installment of the PENC webinar series. My name is Katie Cox and I'm the PENC Membership Director. I will be serving as moderator for today's presentation. Please feel free to use the chat box if you have any technical issues and I will try to assist you. We will be taking questions at the end of the presentation and you may use the questions box to type those in at any time throughout. Today's presenter is Greg Sauer with WSP. Mr. Sauer has 17 years of experience working on all aspects of transportation planning and traffic engineering, but his passion is public transportation. He approaches every project with the same mission, to provide great mobility options for all transportation users that increase quality of life. He has worked on BRT projects in Raleigh, Chicago, Seattle, Indianapolis, Atlanta, Pittsburgh, and Nashville. Mr. Sauer is currently the project manager for the Wake Transit BRT program, New Bern Corridor Concept Design, and NEPA clearance. He has a BS and MS from North Carolina State University and is a North Carolina professional engineer. Thanks so much for being here today.
Great, well, thank you, Katie. As noted, my name is Greg Sauer. I work with WSP, and I'm going to be presenting on the Wake County Bus Rapid Transit Plan. It's going to be include both a overview of what is Bus Rapid Transit, or BRT as it's commonly referred to, a little bit about the Wake BRT program and how we were able to locally get money and to plan and build the projects for BRT, and then finally take you in a little bit more detail on one of the corridors, the first one, the New Bern Avenue corridor, to show you some of the concept work that we did for about 30% design. And then at the end, I've got a video that was created, a promotional video for the New Bern Avenue corridor that I'll play as well. So first of all, what is Bus Rapid Transit? Also known as BRT. This is a flexible, high-capacity transit that combines physical and operational elements to improve speed and reliability and provide high-frequency service and extended service hours. So that's a very verbose way of saying we use big buses that go faster than local buses. They often have their own lanes, so we can make sure that they are on time. It can communicate through intelligent transportation systems or transit signal priority with the stations as well as signals to ensure that there is reliable service. And service is provided through a longer portion of the day, often between 20 or 22 hours. This is an image from the first BRT in the United States. This is the Euclid Avenue or Cleveland Health Line in Cleveland itself. This has sort of been the gold standard for a while of bus rapid transit. A few years ago, maybe about 5 years ago, BRT really started to take off in other cities. Excuse me. So there have been some advances in the design concepts and how the systems are operated. But again, this is a really great example of bus rapid transit done right. So what are the core components of bus rapid transit? How do we translate this from what I just said in my previous sentence into a little bit more bite-sized and easy to understand? So the first thing is the concept of dedicated running way. And this is really a lane that is exclusive for buses. I'll show you in a moment when we look at some of the designs. There are opportunities for personal vehicles to cross over these lanes in order to access driveways or parking. But for the most part, these are dedicated lanes. They may be colored red. They may also just have stencils and writing that says bus only, things like that. But the intent is, again, to separate the bus from traffic and allow it to have a little bit more free flow. The concept of the enhanced stations, the idea here is to make this very inviting for the public to utilize this service, but also to make it efficient. So the platform is raised, so it's at the same level as the door height of a vehicle. Vehicles can dock very close to the platform itself, eliminating the need to have any type of stairs or ramps to come out, especially for ADA accessibility. There are opportunities to board at many different doors. The ticket vending machine is off board, so it is actually in the station, so you purchase your ticket there. You don't have to engage with the driver. And you certainly don't have to wait behind the old woman who's counting out her pennies from her change purse in order to pay for her fare. Information is provided at these stations as well that tells you when the next bus is coming, so you understand how to time it. Then there are shelters that provide some separation and some protection from the weather, quality lighting to provide visibility, and other amenities such as seating and things like that. One of the really important pieces of bus rapid transit is the utilization of specialized vehicles. As noted below, this is key to doing branding. So there's often a negative perception associated with local transit buses. And while I don't have that perception myself, the recognition is in order to attract riders, especially those who are not dependent upon transit, utilizing these special vehicles is really important. In this case, what you're looking at is a vehicle called an articulated bus. It has a regular bus coach in the front and then a baffle in between, or a little accordion style rubber that connects a little trailer behind, so it extends the bus out to about 60 feet. This allows you to have more room for seating as well as room to store bicycles if you'd like. And in the current climate, a vehicle like this that gives you additional space is really important as we're not able to have our buses filled to full capacity as we continue to operate during the pandemic. From a branding standpoint, again, the idea is to make these unique. We want the bus rapid transit to stand out against local transit and to have individuals see it as a very viable option for transportation. Some of the branding work for the Wake Transit buses will be done under the next phase of design, under final design. But you'll see we have some unique branding along the way, some red and other things that show off the vehicles. Transit signal priority, which is also described as TSP, is a way for the bus hardware to communicate with hardware in traffic control signals and basically allow the green light to be extended. So let's say a bus is within some determined amount of space, 200 feet from an intersection, and the signal normally would be turning to red. It can actually hold that green for a couple other seconds so the bus can get through. There's also other applications of this that would be what's called early green, where in this case you see the bus is in its own side of the road. It would be given a green light for the bus to move before the other general purpose traffic goes. So there's a number of things that you can do, and the real purpose of this is to provide reliability to make sure that the buses are staying on schedule. From a frequency standpoint, one of the big goals is to make sure that you can utilize bus rapid transit without having any schedule. So generally, we're looking at operations about every 10 minutes within the peak hours. This would be 6 to 9 in the morning, maybe 4 to 7 in the afternoon. And off peak, you're looking at frequencies between 15 and 20 minutes. So the idea again is during the peak hour, you can just walk up to a station, and on average, a bus should be coming within about 5 minutes. And then off peak, you're looking at 7.5 to 10 minutes. We know that a lot of individuals do not use, or at least cite the reason for not using transit as they don't understand the schedules. Again, some of the local buses that maybe only operate every half hour, 45 minutes, or 1 hour, understanding when you need to be at the stop is really important. So we want to remove that barrier and provide the frequency for individuals, both to have better options to get into work or away from work in a peak hour, for example. But again, so you can just walk out and know that a bus is coming, in 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes. Along with this, the idea for bus rapid transit is to provide a really stable service hours. So in this case, between about 4 a.m. and midnight is what we're looking at for the Wake BRT. So it's 20 hours. And then during the weekdays, and then on the weekends, a little bit less, 5:30 to 12. And the idea again is to really spread it out. So if you work if there's a working third shift, you might be able to get in earlier or later. Definitely there's some public comments or questions that I always receive, such as, if you close it at 12, are you missing individuals who, might be leaving bars and going home? For right now, yes, maybe. I think there's some talk internally at the city of Raleigh about extending those hours. In other cities, they actually run 24 hours a day to provide that high capacity and that fast transit all over. And it has been seen as a very beneficial. So there is opportunity to expand those service hours. But again, 20 hours out of 24, it's a pretty good span of service. When we talk about the enhanced fare collection system, the real idea here is to speed up getting on and off of a bus. So you pay for your ticket on a vending machine that's on the platform, and you can there's different ways if you have like a mobile app, or if you have a pass itself, a monthly pass, you can just sort of tap onto this machine, or you can actually purchase a paper ticket itself from the machine. These are then validated, where as you walk onto your bus, you just touch a little validator and it verifies that you've paid and you have a ticket. But what's really nice about not having the fare collection on the bus is that you can board or alight at any of the doors. So if we go back to the picture of the specialized vehicle, the articulated bus gives you a third door on the right-hand side. So you can board between the front, which is next to the driver, the middle, which is typically on a 40-foot bus, the quote back, and then even further behind. One of the things that we're looking at for Wake Transit from a specialized vehicle standpoint is actually having doors on the left side of the bus as well. Now, the application and the design for New Bern Avenue, which I'll be showing you later, assumes that all buses will only have right doors. However, as we move forward into some of the other corridors where there's really some restrictions on space and the need to run the buses in the median, one solution to help out is to actually have doors on the left side. So the way that would work is there would not be a door where the driver is, so the front would not have it, but those last two places would have doors on the left side. So you could have 5 total doors on your bus. So a lot of flexibility, again, involved in designing these systems and trying to figure out what is the best way to maximize the physical space on the roadway and decrease the typical delays that a bus would see. So a lot of buses, you're going to see time that's incurred at traffic signals. You're going to see time incurred at actually stopping. Local bus stops are about a quarter of a mile away, so you have to slow down the vehicle, come to a complete stop, open the door, let people get on, let people pay, have them go sit, start moving again, and then in another quarter mile, you have to do that all over. Bus Rapid Transit typically has station spacing of about a half mile in urban areas and can be a lot further away in suburban areas. So just by eliminating the number of stops itself, you're going to be reducing the delay. And then again, if you have the level boarding, you have boarding through multiple doors, things like that, you can get down to having a bus pull in, do the boardings and alightings within about 10 seconds, and then take off right away. So a lot of different things that you can do to speed up service and provide that reliability. So here is a example station that you would see for a Bus Rapid Transit, and calling out a couple of the elements that I've described and then a couple others. So starting on the top left, the intelligent transportation system. So again, there's communication devices between the bus and the traffic signals. There's also communication between the bus and the station to allow there to be real-time information. So the bus may be 3 minutes away from arriving at the station, and the station would have a display that said just that. Next bus with, in 3 minutes, next bus after that, 13 minutes, or whatever it is. The station itself, going around counterclockwise, and this particular graphic is shown as one that really is set to sort of provide some windbreak, and also to provide some separation between the general purpose travel lanes as well as where individuals will be sitting and waiting. There's a lot of different applications of this. In the first image that I showed you of the Cleveland Health Line, they actually have enclosed spaces, and a lot of that is due to the cold and snow specifically that they experience during the winter. There's also stations in Arizona that have that are much more open, have a lot more opaque colors in glass in order to provide shadows for cooling. And they even, some of them have misting sprays that go out to provide a little bit of cool in that hot, excuse me, in that hot environment. There are many different architectural philosophies as to how you want to design the station itself. And that is often one of the core components of the branding for the system itself. You want individuals to look at a station and immediately know that that's a bus rapid transit station and understand how to utilize it. Then we're looking at the vehicle, again, trying to think of ways that we can brand these and separate them from a visual standpoint from local buses. This vehicle that's being shown is more of what I would call a European tram style vehicle. Due to Buy America restrictions, we can't always get the more unique vehicles that maybe we would like to see. I often describe to individuals that, you know, in the perfect world, you would have a vehicle that really looks like a subway car or a light rail car, and the only difference is that it has rubber tires instead of sitting on rails itself. So again, there's some different ways that you can design the vehicle and color it and brand it. And there are a number of different vehicles that are starting to come out in the United States as a reaction to the number of bus rapid transit systems that are coming around in all the various cities. On the bottom, we have the ticket vending machine. So again, this is off board. You can go up to it and you can punch in your destination. In this case for Raleigh, you could buy a day pass, which is good all day and allows you to ride unlimited. You can purchase a 7-day pass or a monthly pass or any of the likes, but it gives you all that right there. And then as you walk in, there'll be a validator that you just tap on. Next to the ticket vending machine, we're showing a map. This is, you know, pretty standard at a typical bus stop, although this would be a much larger map. You often see information about the local geography, points of interest, distances to, you know, museums or otherwise. And then you see on the top of that, there's a variable message sign, the red LED that would be broadcasting, you know, the next bus coming in 10 minutes, or it takes you 12 minutes by BRT to get to the next station. Some of that type of information is provided. In this graphic, the guideway is shown in green, and the reason we have that is to show a difference from the brick itself. But again, you could see that shown in red paint. You could also see it just marked with even the HOV diamond and then the white stencil of bus only. There's a number of different ways to show that, but it's something that designates the exclusivity of the guideway for the bus itself, as opposed to where general purpose lanes are operating. The level boarding, it's a little hard to see in this graphic, but there will be ramps that come up from sidewalk level up to the door height of a bus. You're looking at somewhere between 13 to 15 inches, depending on what type of bus it is, what weather environment it is as far as keeping the pressure in the tires, and even coming into account as far as the load of the passengers and the weight itself. A lot of the modern buses have airbags that can inflate and deflate to move the door height itself, so you can do some fine tuning. Again, if you need to account for you know, different aspects that would change where that is. The real benefit is you are going to be able to meet the ADA requirements for both the vertical and the horizontal clearance distances, so you can have wheelchairs roll on and off. And then it also can benefit other users, such as a mother with a stroller or a student with a bicycle. All of these things are easy to get in and out Typical bus, you're either going to need to step up, or in the case of utilizing some sort of mobility enhancement device, vehicle, you might need to lower a ramp itself. And these, again, are all things that take time to actually get on the bus before it starts moving itself. And then the final thing is the branding. So again, you see that there is a unique way. This is the fictional Park Line, and Magnolia Street is the branded station name. And this would be looking, again, different than your local service. So maybe your local service in this case is colored with blue or even red, but this green is utilized exclusively for bus rapid transit. So when you see one of those buses, when you see a sign, you know exactly what that is. So here's an image of a bus rapid transit system from Grand Rapids, Michigan. This is actually called the Silver Line Rapid. And you can see some of the elements that I just described that are shown here to just sort of give you a visual sense. Now, this particular image you're seeing, the station is much more compact than what we previously saw. And the nice thing about bus rapid transit is you have a lot of flexibility built in. So you might have in a downtown environment a much larger station. And as you work your way out to more suburban areas, you can scale down the station itself, or have just sort of generally different ways that you provide amenities. In this image, if you look on the forefront of the station, there are some seating that's outside of the canopy itself. But maybe again, in areas where you have more individuals waiting, you might have a larger canopy that can cover some of those seatings better. All right, so that is what is bus rapid transit. And certainly at the end of this presentation, I'd be happy to take some questions. And I know there'll probably be some about exactly clarifying, what is bus rapid transit, so we can discuss that at the end. Now, if we get into the Wake County Transit Plan itself, so this is Wake County in North Carolina, for those of you who maybe are outside of the state, and Raleigh is located in Wake County, is the state capital of North Carolina. And in 2016, developed a transit plan that included what they called 4 big moves. So the first was to have better regional connection. This includes express buses and rail service. There was a commuter rail component of that plan. The second was to connect all Wake County communities. Right now, Cary and Raleigh have their own dedicated systems, but this would be expanding systems even into Garner and to Wake Forest and some of these other locations in the county itself. The third was to provide frequent, reliable urban transit, and frequency for this definition was to have 15-minute or better service on some of the key lines. So as we discussed, you're looking at 15 minutes in the off-peak for bus rapid transit, and then probably about half of that, 7.5 or 10 minutes within the peak hour. So BRT can meet that. And then the fourth is just to generally provide greater access to transit itself. So that's both in expanding the physical footprint of the transit, but also having better opportunities and options, such as bus rapid transit, to provide speedier and more frequent service. So the pieces that are really important for the bus rapid transit, which we'll be getting into more detail, first is specifically calling out the implementation of bus rapid transit, recognizing that dedicated dedicated lanes are required on some of these roadways, and even at intersections, opportunities for the buses to get around some traffic that's queuing, and then all the components that we talked about earlier as far as the enhanced station, the branding, etc. The way that this would be paid for is a 0.5-cent county-wide sales tax. So up until a few months ago, this county sales tax was bringing in between $90 and $100 million each year. I don't know the numbers right now, but one can only guess it's much lower than that, given that individuals are not spending a lot of money right now on goods and services. And longer term projection is being worked out right now with Wake County to try to figure out how much money realistically this program can bring in per year, which would impact providing the services that are described in the 4 big moves. Then the last piece is, again, the increase of the bus service. So the bus rapid transit itself is a great way to increase service, but another really good way of utilizing or leveraging the bus rapid transit is to provide crossing routes, local routes or express routes that connect in and provide transfer opportunities from bus rapid transit. So you're really extending that footprint of how far you can get on transit within the region in a fairly reasonable amount of time. So here is an image of Raleigh itself. Downtown is centered in the middle of this image. And this is showing the 4 corridors for bus rapid transit implementation that were identified in the Wake Transit Plan. You've got the northern corridor to the north, which coming out of downtown, for those of you who are familiar with Raleigh, is generally going along Capitol Boulevard. You have the southern to the south, which would be utilizing either Wilmington or South Saunders to then go into Garner. The western to the west goes along Western Boulevard out to Cary, and then the New Bern Avenue project, which is to the east, goes out New Bern Avenue itself, and that's what we'll be discussing in more detail in a moment. Currently, New Bern Avenue is at about 30% design. The final design will be starting in the next month, maybe, I think, or thereabouts. There's planning work going on for the southern and the western corridors to nail down the alignment. And then probably in the fall, some real preliminary design work and NEPA clearance will start in earnest. And the northern corridor is a little bit further behind. The pre-planning to nail down the route alignment is sort of planned for this fall or this winter, depending on how things kind of shake out with these other corridors. So now I'd like to talk about the New Bern Avenue bus rapid transit. This map shows from the left downtown Raleigh. The Go Raleigh station is the current transfer facility for all Go Raleigh buses that serve Raleigh and other parts of Wake County. And the red line would be the actual bus rapid transit. There's a current route number 15, which basically runs this alignment today as a local bus service. It is the first, second, or third most productive route for Go Raleigh, depending on which month it is and other things like that. But in general, it's one of the top performing routes. So the stations that are identified here in the circles all of them are at locations where there's currently a station, and there would be local stops that are in between would be effectively removed. However, when doing some GIS analysis, what we're able to find is 92% of all riders today would be within a 5-minute walk of one of the BRT stations. So effectively, you're providing the same amount of coverage and allowing individuals to just possibly walk a little bit further. Of course, somebody who's got to stop right in front of their house is going to complain and that sort of thing. But as you'll see in some of the cross-section designs, we provide some very safe pedestrian opportunities to get to and from stations. So as you're looking at this, there's 2 kind of pieces that I want to point out. One is the solid red line. This is what we're calling infrastructure improvements. So these are locations where bus rapid transit would have a dedicated lane, exclusive, and provide the bus the best reliability and the best speed. The dashed portion on the eastern side of this map would be where the bus would only operate and mix traffic. And part of that is due to width of the roadway and just the general levels of traffic that are out there, unless you are making some pretty big widenings and taking some right of way. It's going to be pretty prohibitive to have dedicated lanes. So the nice thing is, even though there would be no dedicated lanes, there's still opportunities to have the other applications, such as the enhanced stations, the further spacing of those stations itself, and then to have transit signal priority along some of those signals also. So effectively, the project still is going to provide the levels of reliability and speed that we talked about early on. I guess I do want to point one other piece out on the western edge, where you see the Edenton Street and New Bern Avenue, and you'll see the little station symbols with the arrows. That is a one-way pair today. So New Bern Avenue is one-way eastbound, and Edenton Street is one-way westbound. So in an application like that, you actually provide a station for both of those roadways. It's only separated by 1 block, so going in between those is fairly easy. All the locations that have the solid white ball is what we call a two-way station, where you can board and go either eastbound or westbound from the same location. Here's some of the images of what the downtown portion of this could be. So if you look at the cross section, which is shown on the left, the typical is you would have a bus-only lane on the right side of the roadway where the bus would operate. Now these would be called a right BAT, and BAT stands for Business Access and Transit. And why it's called BAT is there are driveways, there are parking decks and things like that that are next to the bus-only lane. So personal vehicles would be allowed to get into the lane in order to turn in and out of those locations. The intent is not for the personal vehicles to ride an entire block in that lane, but again, to give the opportunity to just cross briefly and get in and out. They'll also be adjacent to 2 general purpose lanes and then parking on one side of the roadway. The roadways that are being identified here currently have parking on both sides and then 2 general purpose lanes. So we're effectively repurposing a parking lane and turning it into a transit lane. Now, if you look at the plan view on the right, one thing I'd like to point out is the dashed red areas. Those are to indicate where you can cross over the traffic, or at a right turn at an intersection, there can be shared use. So vehicles that are making a right turn can come into that bus lane, can queue up, and then can make a right turn as the intersection goes green. The bus itself would just continue straight across the intersection and move down along its path. We also see at the top of this graphic in green, there's a bike lane that's being shown. That is an existing bike lane. And in fact, since this graphic was developed, we have added that bike lane stays. But one of the unique pieces of this is you can see the bike lane is behind the transit station itself. So you have the sidewalk, the bike lane, and then the transit station. This is to prevent any negative interactions between cyclists and the bus itself at stations. We've got some site issues associated with that, and obviously you have some pretty big differences in the size and weight of vehicles. So bringing them behind is what we found in other areas the safest application of a bike lane near transit stop. This is some information for the one-way pair, just to show you how that might look. So on the south side, this is the one-way eastbound on New Bern Avenue. We've got the parking, we've got 2 general purpose lanes, and then a bus-only lane, and a multi-use path that is runs the entire length of this project from downtown out to Lake Med Hospital, where the dedicated bus lanes end, provide bicycle and pedestrian opportunities to provide safety, basically, to move all the various people to and from their locations, and then getting into the station itself. Again, on the south side, you can see that the station platform is adjacent to the bus lane, and that the multi-use path would come behind it. If you look to the top of the plan view, this is the Edenton Street, and this is one-way westbound. There's a little bit of a unique difference here. Instead of having a bicycle lane or the multi-use path, there's actually parking next to the bus lane itself. So as we talked about earlier, the Business Access and Transit, or the BAT lane, would allow personal vehicles to cross that dedicated lane, make their parking maneuver, parallel park, or pull out. And so you still have the opportunity to maintain parking along both of these streets. There's residential, more on the western side as you get closer to downtown, and then there's some commercial that's kind of sprinkled in along the eastern portion of this route. So again, keeping parking is really important for these opportunities. Here's an image that shows on the bottom what it would look like in a location where you would have a bus stop. This is showing what Edenton Street would look like. And if you look at the top image plan view, basically the center, you'll see the station platform and the bus lane directly adjacent to it. This is effectively the image that you would see there. So, right, again, having some sidewalks and other multi-use paths in some instances behind the station, it would be the preferred way to go. Now, moving towards the east, the one-way pairs go away. They combine into New Bern Avenue itself, which provides two-way opportunities for travel. And in this area, we would have what's known as a median dedicated running way or offset running way, any of those sorts of terms where the buses themselves would be physically separated, in this case with planted medians, grass strips in some locations, from the general purpose travel lanes. This allows the greatest opportunity for a bus to maximize speed, provides no impediments for a bus, such as a right turning vehicle that maybe is stopped at a driveway or at an intersection, left turning vehicles trying to cross, things like that, and provides a unique design for the stations, which would actually be in the center of the roadway. And would allow for, boarding and alighting into these median platforms. So the buses don't need to pull off to the curb at all. So from a plan view sense, it's sometimes a little bit hard to conceptualize what that would look like. So here's an image that shows from a kind of a bird's eye view how a typical station setup would be. So if we start on the left side of the image, you can see that there's a bus is heading westbound as just pulling out of the station itself. So on the very edge of the image, you can see the grass median. And at the intersection itself, that 12-foot width, 11-foot width, sort of depending on where you are along the corridor, is where you would place the station itself. So the station is lifted. You can see the yellow warning strip against the station directly underneath the awning. And then there's a ramp that goes down to sidewalk level or to a roadway level, where you can then utilize the crosswalks to go to the north or to the south. Pedestrian push buttons are provided on all sides of that. And then the timing is such that you can provide a really safe opportunity for crossing for individuals to get to the station itself. If you look on the right side of the image, you see very similar setup, although this is now reversed because you have service to the vehicle that's going to be headed eastbound. And same operation, same way of using it. This particular design is often referred to as offset because the stations are not directly adjacent to each other. They are on opposite sides of the intersection. These are also called far side because these are on the far side of the intersection after you've cleared the light itself. Depending on the geometry and just general location of other things in the roadway or destinations, you may also see near side, which would be stations that are before the intersection, one station being near side, one station being far side. There's a lot of different applications. So again, this particular application is designed for utilizing the right side doors of the vehicles that are shown here, but you can also have the left door vehicles, which would basically just flip the locations of those stations from where they are today. So that is the end of my presentation, taking you through all the different components of what BRT is, how the Way Transit Plan was set up, and then also a little bit about the New Bern Avenue project itself. I'm going to be playing a video right now that was developed for promotion of the New Bern Avenue project. It has a lot of the information that I've already covered. It does have captions here in the event that you cannot hear the sound coming from my computer. Katie and I were having a little bit of difficulty earlier, so I hope you're able to hear the sound, and if not, please pay attention to the closed captions, and I will be available for questions, once this is over in about 4 or 5 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and play it.
Priority of traffic signal, outdoor curriculum, enhanced station, branding of the DRT system. DRT Fair will be the same as Go Valley Citywide Fair, which is currently about 5. The service is on midnight every day, and buses arrive in every 10 minutes during travel time. DRT will service a computer travel option for Wade County residents. This video focuses on project detail for the first DRT corridor in the county. The Wade DRT corridor runs from Go Valley Station in downtown Raleigh to Eagle Road. The station connects to State Office University, Conroe High School, Longview Shopping Center, Lakewood Hospital, Tower Shopping Center. DRT operations for the new network.
Oops. Apologize about that.
These corridors connect downtown Raleigh, destination located east along Hebron Avenue, to the west along Western Boulevard, to the north Fort Capital Boulevard, and to the south Fort Boulevard. DRT is a mass-based transportation that offers speed and reliability for Raleigh. DRT will work with improvements such as DRT-style 40-60-foot buses, transformer lane, priority of traffic signal, outdoor curriculum, enhanced station, and branding of the DRT system. DRT Fair will be the same as Go Valley Citywide Fair, which is currently about 25. The service until midnight every day, and buses about every 10 minutes during county travel time. DRT will service a commuter travel option for Wade County residents. This video focuses on project detail for the first DRT corridor in Wade County. The Wade DRT corridor runs from Go Valley Station in downtown Raleigh to Eagle Road. The station is connected to State Office University, Conroe High School, Longview Shopping Center, Lakewood Hospital, Tower Shopping Center. DRT operations for the DRT buses will operate from the traffic from Newport Road to Sunnybrook Road. DRT buses will operate from the Union and a transit road section from Sunnybrook Road to Raleigh Boulevard. The bus only lanes in this section will allow fast, smooth, and quick travel within general traffic. Let's say the dedicated bus only lane within the transit road section, which begins near the original campus of Sunnybrook Road and extend into downtown Raleigh. To provide a fast and safe trip, separate bus only lane helps DRT buses in around traffic flow, and traffic signal priority helps DRT buses to move traffic and get through intersections faster. Additionally, a multi-use point will offer bicycles to pedestrians as safe route along the corridor with connections to DRT station. Finally, in the last section, DRT buses will operate in bus only lanes located along the right side of the following one-way road: Stevenson Street, York Street, Henderson Street, Walker Street, and Hebron Avenue. In this segment, stations flow into the sidewalk and existing street. General traffic will cross bus only lanes to park or to make a right turn for this number driveway. Let's take a look at a curbside station along the one-way section of the corridor. DRT bus stations will have three branding and design, allowing DRT to stand out from other transit services. DRT-style custom buses provide more seating and additional doors, high-level businesses getting on and off the bus easy. navigate the next phase of the project and will likely include the following features: raised platforms for level boarding, weather protection, and off-board barricading. Then, let's check out a BRT station within the transitway section of the corridor. These stations will be located in the median close to signal lines and sections. Pedestrians and bicyclists who get to the station area to reach safely to the next stop by using a crosswalk at the intersection. Stations along all four BRT corridors will have features designed to make the service comfortable and convenient to all their family residents. This includes raised warning strips, audible bus and audio announcements, programs, handrails, seating areas, and more. The project schedule highlights 2 days related to bringing the first BRT service to Lake County. The new BRT Cleveland Avenue Corridor project began the design and implementation phase in 2019. Construction for the project is planned to take place between 2021 and 2023. BRT service for the corridor is planned to be in operation by the end of 2023. Your participation in the planning of this project, as well as other parts of the Route Transit Plan, including thinking about how we should grow around the BRT system, is important. There are many ways to be involved. For stay up to date with views on all 4 Route Transit BRT corridors on the project website at ync.maryland.BRT, and on social media following us at Ray Valley on Twitter.
All right, well, that concludes my presentation, and would not be a webinar if you didn't have a hiccup, so I apologize that the video reset for a little bit there, and I do hope that you were able to hear it. I'm going to go ahead and post a link to the video in the chat in the event that the sound did not work or you would like to share this with others. At this point, I'm open to taking any questions that anyone has.
Great, thanks so much, Greg. We do have several questions that have come through. First, what is the biggest challenge in retrofitting existing right-of-way for center of the roadway-based systems? How much rebuild?
Sure. So like many roadway projects, utilities is the biggest piece. In this case, the area that's being shown here where the transitway is operating is a wide grass strip median today, with ditching along the middle and some some cable lines and some other utilities along underneath. So working to ensure that you can keep the utility access is really probably the biggest thing that you see. The other is just generally balancing the need for space for bus rapid transit versus general purpose or bike lanes. New Bern Avenue is unique in that there is, again, this wide median in the middle. So adding the bus lanes did not, require repurposing a general purpose lane. If you have a tight urban environment often where maybe there's 2 travel lanes today, adding a dedicated bus lane would put it down to 1. You may run into some traffic issues associated with the general purpose travel.
Okay. What resources, if any, were used to help design the BRT system? For example, FTA published a 400-page BRT report a decade ago. Was this document of any use?
FTA definitely has some information on bus rapid transit, but the pieces that are probably most informative or most helpful for design now, there are a number of planning documents that have been put out by APTA, the American Public Transportation Association. They're available on their website. And the most recent and probably the most impactful for design of bus rapid transit specifically is the NACTO, North American City Transportation Officials, I believe is how it spells out, Transit Design Guide. And that is also available on the NACTO, I believe it's NACTO.org. And it goes into all the different types of stations, how you can locate them, the different types of bus lanes you could do, whether it be in the median or on the curb, how you can interact with traffic signals, things like that. So if I were somebody who was looking for a little bit more detail on bus rapid transit, I would investigate the NACTO website, the Transit Design Guidelines.
Okay. Is there an efficiency difference in operation of a central lane setup as opposed to an outside lane setup?
Yes. So the biggest difference is that you do not have to, in the median, do not have to have a bus slow down for any vehicles entering or exiting parking or a driveway itself. Also at intersections, you have vehicles that are queuing up to make right turns, unless you have an opportunity where there's a dedicated right turn lane itself and vehicles can flow. And then just in general, there is kind of friction anytime you're operating any bus or any vehicle adjacent to another vehicle. So with the physical separation in the median, the bus basically is able to just sort of, do its own thing and drive. It's also driving along the most efficient portion of the roadway, the center line itself. So it's got the straightest travel direction. And so you would like to provide a fully separated transit way, median-based system. The reality is not always available. So as you saw, there are different applications of bus rapid transit, and they're all going to be, kind of looked at a block by block level to understand what's going to maximize the operations for BRT, recognizing safety, and then also how this might impact the general purpose travel lanes. I will say the biggest issue with curbside bus rapid transit that has been daylighted over the past few years is box trucks that are parking to deliver Amazon packages and shared ride services like Uber or Lyft parking in bus lanes waiting for their riders to get in. So it requires some enforcement in order to keep vehicles from stopping within transit lanes along the curb. It's much easier to keep vehicles out of a physically separated dedicated lane.
Okay, we have a couple of questions about funding. Any specially designed BRT funds available, or did the funding come from the usual sources?
So FTA has a program called the CIG, the Capital Improvement Grants. And this is a program that's set up specifically for high capacity transit. So there's funding, different funding categories. There's one called Core Capacity Improvement, which is really set up to enhance legacy subway systems, such as in Chicago or in Boston, things like that. There's another program called New Starts, which is to construct bus rapid transit or light rail, and it's for larger value projects, ones that are over 300 million. This particular project went in another category, a subcategory of New Starts called Small Starts. And basically, there's a ratings application that you put together, and it looks at benefit costs, such as increases in ridership, decreases in greenhouse gas, how the local system can pay to operate it, and things of that nature, and allows the systems to ask for a federal match of up to 80% of the total project cost. Now, you get better scores the more local monies that are put in. So the New Bern Avenue project put in, the local monies was about 51%. Excuse me, the total cost of this project is looking like it's going to be somewhere in the $70 to $75 million range when it's all said and done. One of the bigger things is going to be how the construction bids come out. So the federal government is effectively putting in, 36 million, 35 million, sort of depending on where things land.
To follow up on that, how does the cost of BRT compare to light rail?
The cost of BRT is substantially cheaper than light rail. These are much easier to design and build. There's a lot more expertise from a construction and a design standpoint for roadway-based projects. I often joke with people that outside of the stations themselves, these are roadway jobs, right? I mean, the center running travel lane has got to have the same slope characteristics, the way that you take water off of it, the thickness of the pavement, etc. So depending on where you are, especially in an urban environment, you could see DRT systems being anywhere from a tenth as costly on a per mile basis to even more better savings than that. Now that's just for the capital improvements. The other piece is on the operations themselves. Operating a bus on rubber tire is much cheaper than operating a rail vehicle. One is the maintenance facility. You don't have to have a dedicated maintenance facility for buses. Are already in play here. And then just the general systems have a lot of experience with buses, and the drivers know how to use them, et cetera. So operating on an annual basis is, again, much cheaper than light rail.
Are the stations in the Raleigh area generally near side or far side?
So the stations, the goal is to have them far side, excuse me. So along the New Bern Avenue corridor, of the 11 stations, I think there were 2 that are near side and the rest are far side. But again, some of the applications would be due to other unique components. So maybe there's a parking lot with a major driveway access on the far side of an intersection, and so you need to pull it to the near side, or maybe there's a museum that's on the near side, as you want to have the stop directly in front of the museum to have ease of access. But generally, you'd like to be far side so the vehicle's cleared the intersection. Once it loads up with riders, it can then take off and doesn't have to wait on a potential red light.
Try to squeeze in a few last questions. Do you expect this to stay in service after on-demand autonomous vehicles come into service?
Yes, I think that my personal opinion on the time frame of autonomous vehicles is that it's probably a little bit further out than maybe some people are hoping. But also the reality is, from a cost standpoint, there's always going to be a segment of the population that will not be able to afford, whether owning an autonomous vehicle or renting, or however the setup is. So there will always be a need for bus rapid transit to still exist. Now, there are ways that you could apply autonomous vehicles as well. So you could envision now a platoon of bus rapid transit vehicles that effectively operate as a train, where you have a driver in the first bus, and maybe you have 2 buses behind it, sort of a 3-bus train in the downtown. And as you get a little bit further out, maybe that last bus peels off to serve neighborhoods to the north. You keep going, and then that second bus peels off to do neighborhoods to the south. So there's a lot of applications between CAV and transit in general that I think you'll see some crossover.
All right, well, we are right at the hour. Mr. Sauer, thank you so much for presenting today. There's a few questions that we did not get to, but I will pass those along and we will get those answered for you. Thank you everyone for participating today. If you have additional questions that didn't get answered, feel free to email them to me and I will pass them on. Your PDH form and your survey will be emailed this afternoon. Our next webinar is on June 3rd. We're going to have NC Bells discussing best practices for remote work. Thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you next time.